Acromag 611T and 612T isolated transmitters receive DC current or DC voltage input signals, provide isolation, and output a proportional DC current or DC voltage signal. The 611T is a single-channel module, and the 612T offers dual I/O channels. Universal input ranges can accept either a minus to plus 100 milliamps DC signal with full range capability. The minimum recommended span is 4 milliamps DC, or a minus to plus 100 volts DC signal with full range capability, and a minimum recommended span of 1 volt DC. A 0 to 20 amps AC signal can also be monitored utilizing Acromag's AC current sensor. Output ranges can be configured for 0 to 20 milliamps DC or 0 to 10 volts DC with full range capability.
The broad input and output ranges offer flexibility for panel shops and end users for many different application requirements. In the current input mode, the loop burden is a very low 10 ohm impedance. This makes these isolated transmitters ideal for tapping off, in series, an existing 4 to 20 milliamp loop to add a measuring or monitoring instrument. The high voltage input impedance of 500 kiloohms offers the ability to do the same thing with wiring a circuit in parallel with minimum voltage or current loss. The output of the 611T and 612T isolated transmitter drives purely resistive loads. The current output load resistance range can be up to 550 ohms, or simply two 250 ohm load devices. Installation is quick and easy with the auto configuration and self-ranging features of the module. The internal microcontroller automatically senses the input source type, either voltage or current, and selects the optimum performance range for your 0 and full-scale input values. The push buttons on the front of the module are for adjusting to the desired output. This includes adjusting for a proportional or reverse acting response from the module. When the desired calibration is completed, simply press the Set button and the configuration settings are stored in the module's non-volatile memory. The 611 and 612T isolated transmitters are designed to fit applications where three-way isolation is required. Three-way isolation refers to isolation between input, output, and power. The module is also designed to meet the stringent approvals of being CE marked and UL and CUL listed. Other special features and benefits include quick release terminal blocks for easy installation, LED indication for power, operation, and configuration status, configuration lockout capability, and a high-resolution 16-bit A to D for high accuracy of better than 0.1% of span and reliability.
The 611 and 612T isolated transmitters fit all typical types of DC I/O applications. Three-way isolation is the safest choice when retrofitting or expanding an existing system when uncertainties about isolation of instruments in each current loop exist, or the grounding scheme is unknown. In applications where the power supply needs to be isolated, the 611 and 612T can be used because they are powered by an external power supply with separate power terminals, and they source current to purely resistive loads. This means that a power supply is not required in the output loop to drive the output signal. Also, the external power supply does not have to be a regulated power supply, as it will work off a range of 10 to 36 volts DC. Typical applications would be if you want to add another load, such as a chart recorder, or a display, or a PLC input, and power needs to be isolated. You can install the 611 or 612T to drive the extra load. The 611 and 612T solves the case of multiple grounds for both the input, output, and power circuits by isolating them. The result is a loop tied into a good reference point without having the potential of a ground loop to bring down the process loop. One example is where a field sensor is used as an input to a PLC, and the field sensor obtains power from an external DC source. This source may have a different ground potential than the PLC or field device. If this is the case, the power ground must be isolated from both the input and output. The ground potential at the field sensor is also likely to be different from the power source and the PLC. Therefore, input to output isolation is also necessary. By installing the 611T or 612T isolator, the three-way isolation, the potential for ground loops or floating signals is eliminated. The 611 and 612T isolated transmitter can also be used for boosting the signal in applications for long-distance cable runs or high-loop impedance applications. In long cable runs, the cable resistance can add a significant load to your output loop. Or, where many devices are installed on a loop, the total impedance is greater than what the field device can drive. A signal booster is required to overcome the load impedance. With a low input burden of 10 ohms and the ability to drive up to 550 ohms, the 611 or 612T isolated transmitter is perfect for boosting the signal in these situations. Here we show input electrical hookups based on common DC current and voltage applications. First, we have a two-wire transmitter field device. It involves the use of a DC power supply to power both the field transmitter and the input loop. Going around the loop and starting with the positive terminal of the two-wire transmitter, wire to the positive side of the DC power supply. From the negative side of the power supply, wire to the RTN terminal of the 611T or 612T transmitter. The negative connection on the two-wire transmitter simply ties in with the I+ terminal on the 611T or 612T module. For current input signals, be sure to place a jumper between the two JMP terminals. The next DC current monitoring application is typical of a four-wire device, shown as a DC current input on the slide. The loop is powered from the field device and no external power supply is required in the loop. For this application, the connections are simply field device positive to the I+ terminal and field device negative to the RTN terminal. Again, a jumper is required between the JMP terminals. The next application involves the monitoring of a DC voltage source. This can be either a unipolar or bipolar input voltage signal. As you can see, it's as simple as connecting field device positive with the V+ terminal of the 611 or 612T and the field device negative with the RTN terminal of the 611 or 612T module. No jumpers are required for this application. And finally, the last schematic shows how to monitor AC current using Acromag's toroid sensor. This toroid produces a sourced DC current that can be wired to the 611T or 612T input terminals as shown. This enables transmitting the value of the AC current over long distances for monitoring and control applications. And this sensor provides accurate and safe monitoring of AC loops, as the secondary side of the Acromag toroid includes built-in diodes, so the output loop may be opened without causing harm to the live primary AC current loop. The output supports current ranges from 0 to 20 milliamps DC and voltage ranges from 0 to 10 volts DC. The current output may drive up to 550 ohms, and the voltage output has a compliance of 10 milliamps maximum with short circuit protection. Here, we show the analog output wiring diagram for the 611T and 612T transmitter. Separate terminals are provided for the voltage or current output. The voltage and current output is generated simultaneously, but the channel can only be calibrated to one output range at a time. Dual channel outputs on the 612T share the common and are not isolated from output to output. The output connections for current output applications are simply the I+ terminal of the 611T or 612T transmitter to the positive side of the load, and the negative side of the load to the RTN or return terminal on the 611T or 612T isolated transmitter. And for voltage output applications, the positive side of the load connects to the V+ terminal, while the negative side of the load is tied to the RTN terminal on the 611T or 612T isolated transmitter. For more information on electrical wiring or applications, you can download the operator manual information from Acromag's website or contact the factory for assistance. Thank you.